Evening all. Today's video is actually an unplanned one, and I realise that to some of you the knowledge that I actually do plan these things will be a little bit mind-blowing. But I was going through a box of old bits and pieces, and I found this wagon. Let my glamorous assistant bring it in to show you. Thank you, Frankenshunter. Looks like you could do with some oiling. Okay, so this is a Hornby 20-ton mineral wagon. I've already done a video on one of these, but I thought I would do something different with this. I would like to see if I could put it in a more authentic livery. Hornby has always done it in these private owner liveries. And yeah, I just thought maybe I could make it look a little bit more realistic with a more prototypical BR livery. But as you know, I don't like a clean wagon. I like a grubby, rusty, messy wagon. So that's what I'm going to do here. Step 1, paint the chassis weathered black. I am going to paint it to look all rusty and awful. You may recall I did this a little bit on my last one, and once again, as you can see, I am going all blobby and blotchy and just generally a big old mess. I'm using acrylic paints, as is my habit. Now, an interesting effect you'll notice is that some of the letters are still showing through there, which is not entirely unintentional. So I want to create the effect of a wagon that's been around a long time. It's not been taken good care of. And yeah, the old owner's livery is showing through. Finished. That's a nicely grotty looking wagon, isn't it? I've sort of, I've gone with various different shades of brown. It may look like I've just blobbed them on, but actually I stippled them on. Now, stippling is derived from the French word stipel, which means to blob it on any old how. I'm lying. I'm bored waiting for this paint to dry. That's mostly dry. At least it's dry enough for me to begin the next stage, which is to add the actual paint colour. You see now, most of this is going to be, well, I say most of it, quite a lot of this is going to be covered by the actual colour the wagon would have been painted. In real life, these wagons would have been painted a sort of light grey colour. Now, people get themselves all het up arguing over what shade of grey it should be, and to be fair, I've heard there's quite a lot of shades of grey. I believe they wrote a book about it, in fact. But I don't actually think, when it comes to models, that it matters, because, as I've said before, wagons they'd get dirty, their paint would fade. Keeping them clean was not a priority, because what's the point? It's only going to get dirty again afterwards. So, you know, as long as it's a sort of light to mid shade of grey, it'll look fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to... See, I have not kept this paintbrush very well, which is naughty of me. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to stipple this paint on. As you can see, I'm not trying to get full coverage at all. In fact, in a sense, a badly kept brush is ideal for this sort of thing. Can you see that's... Yeah, that's it. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for. This wagon's been knocked about a bit, the paint's starting to come off. You know, probably due a trip to the works, but in British Railways days, I'm sort of aiming for kind of the 50s, 60s, 70s. A wagon this old would not be a priority at all. So, you know, it's probably going to be scrapped in a few years, let's be honest. That's done. Yeah, I'm rather pleased with that, even if I do say so myself. I've used sort of different thicknesses of paint to sort of give a kind of effect like it's fading. I'm not done yet, though, not by a long shot. So next up we're going to need some wagon markings. I'm just going to paint a patch on here. Interestingly enough, the real-life photos I've seen of these indicate that these patches were often quite roughly done. I don't know if that was sort of how they always were, or if that was just the effect of weathering. Next, I'm going to try something that's entirely new to me, which is, this is a Posca paint marker. And I've heard people rate these for sort of small, intricate painting tasks on models. So I'm wondering if I can use them to just mark up my wagon here. Let's see. Now, as you know, I don't bother making my markings sort of too legible, because in reality they probably wouldn't be, not at a distance. That looks alright. Now these wagons also had a sort of diagonal white line there, which indicated, you see that's the door there, it would sort of indicate on an end-loading wagon sort of where the door would swing. So let's just add that on. Freehand. There we go. That's not the straightest edge I've ever drawn, but it's okay. It's a beaten up wagon. I'm going to allow a little bit of drying time there, and in the meantime I'm just going to do my old thing of a dark watercolour wash on the wagon interior, because once again this is a coal wagon and therefore would get very coal dusty. Next I'm just going to add a few rusty streaks. Those aren't very clear there. Oh, that's better, that's more like it. A few rusty streaks down the body. That one's a bit too obvious. There. Don't want to go too heavy with these. Yeah, once again, if you don't remember my last video or haven't watched it, firstly, you should watch it. It's great. But secondly, what I'm using here is burnt sienna watercolour, which gives you a great rusty brown shade. Let's leave that to dry for a bit, shall we? But wait, there's more. I'm just going to use some of that rusty watercolour really thin, and I'm just going to give the frame a quick going over. Not too rusty, because again, we don't want this to, while this wagon should look like it's nearing the end of its life, it should not look like it's just going to fall apart right there and then. Just a little bit of a rusty kind of edge to all the parts. Right, now for the final stage, and if you follow this channel regularly, you will know that that is to go over it with eyeshadow. Matte black eyeshadow to represent coal dust. Gonna try and get it sort of in the corners there. Yeah. Because really the only cleaning a wagon like this would see would be the occasional rain shower, so think where the rain would go and it would not go. So your corners would be very grubby, your central panels might be okay. Final touch. A little brown on the brake shoes. Et voila! One very elderly, very beaten up mineral wagon eking out its last days in service. Now the great thing about these Hornby mineral wagons is that they are so cheap. They are the ideal place to play around with painting and weathering techniques, because if this had all gone wrong, if this has all turned out dreadful, then at the absolute worst I would have been out of pocket £3, which is what I paid for the wagon, which is a fairly typical price for these wagons second hand. As it is, I have an addition to my collection of steel-bodied mineral wagons that I'm quite pleased with. So yeah, give it a try yourself. Just play around with these old wagons, mess around with paint, see what you wind up with. You may surprise yourself. Anyway, I'll see you soon for another video. Cheerio.